Hello and welcome to Henry Weston's Old. You can tell us dickheads have got microphones for Christmas. Hi, Stu. Welcome back.
Hello. I'm going to play with my light. You probably won't be able to see that changing colour there, will you?
No, I can't.
Yes, so we've got mics and ring lights and all manner of stuff. What a pleasure it is to be here in 2022, Phil.
I know it is. Happy New Year. And genuinely, it's the first time we've spoken. We had a few minutes just before we started recording just to catch up. But yeah, no, good to see you.
And you, mate. Yeah. Here's to another. I guess we're on something like we'll call this season. I think we're on season 3 now. I think I cut season 1 at 7 episodes, so season 2 ran for 8 potentially.
Okay, so season 3, which has got no structure, no outline, it's a little bit kind of hot air, and we'll see where we go. No, we've got some ideas and some plans, which we'll talk about in a minute, really. But let's just talk about Christmas and New Year. How was it?
Very good, actually. And contrary to a blog that I didn't have it published yesterday, but I'd actually wrote as a sort of a guest blogger for someone within the industry who's doing some mental health work through January. I'd wrote in this blog that I wrote in November and hadn't remembered a lot of it, that greenkeepers don't get much time off over Christmas. And I actually had the best part of 2 weeks. So
very nice.
Anyone who read my blog might have been feeling sorry for me, but when they watch this, they won't be. But yeah, really good, mate. Kept busy, had a couple of days doing nothing, but sort of kept busy. You know, you all know, and anyone else with kids will know, a 5.5-year-old doesn't sit still all day, and if they do, they make your life agony. So you have to get out and entertain them. So we're much better at that, and I'm getting better at that. It's taken me a long time, but even I am coming round to the understanding that it is good for me just as much as it is for my daughter to actually get out and do something most days, which may sound silly, but in the past has been a considerable struggle. To anyone who has watched the previous 15 episodes of our discussions will probably be aware of that.
Yeah. So you got to see family. Everyone is healthy.
Yeah. Youngest brother Alex came home from the States. Only popped in for 5 days, but he popped over because he couldn't. He wants to spend his summer vacation, I guess they call it over there, seeing some of America next year. So and all the time, you know, Dad's in reasonable health still, so he came over and he spent a couple of days with us, and we saw pretty much all the local family and some of the extended on my wife's side from Essex. They popped down for a few days, and they've got 3 girls, so you can imagine what the house was like with 4 girls under 11 tearing around it.
Yep.
But good, mate, really good. And yourself, positive one for you?
Yeah, no, pretty good. I had Christmas week off, which I'm very fortunate to be able to do that. Restrictions in Wales are a little bit tighter than they are in England, so a lot of our activities that we'd got planned. So we had tickets to the Welsh Grand National, and we had tickets to go to watch ice hockey on New Year's Day, but that's all behind closed doors. So we've got our money back on those.
Okay.
But you know, that is what it is, and you know, it's done for the right reason. So we'll catch up with other activities later on in the year when it's a bit safer to do it. So, but otherwise, yeah, we got to see quite a bit of family,
Right.
and a couple of quiet days as well. So yeah, all good.
Yeah, we had Disney on Ice cancelled, and I had to pretend to shed a tear when I. Sorry, daughter.
Oh no, we're not going to see Goofy and Frozen.
We've not got to drive to the O2 to see Disney on Ice.
That's all.
No, I take that back. I was devastated. But we did actually. The people we were going with, our good friend Mr. Cookson and his wife and daughter, we managed to catch up with them for a day. Late last week, so that was fantastic.
Okay, very good, very good. And so our last episode, we were. Let's just recap for everybody. We met up with Becca, the Unashamed.
Yes, we did.
Which I really, really enjoyed that, and I hope we get to kind of keep connected with her, because those conversations were really good. But you were a couple of days away from your 4-year soberversary.
Yes.
So how did how did that go? How did that day go and activities around it?
What did we do? Oh, I think we had a takeaway. I ran. I think I had a nice run. I think I put 10 miles in, and then it was our staff Christmas do. But I mean, I decided not to attend because of it was my sober day, and I think everyone was getting a bit panicky with regards to Omicron or whatever we're calling this variant. So I think we had a takeaway or something. It was a good occasion, great occasion. But yeah, the day just went as many other do. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I should have wrote some notes on it, shouldn't I? But I didn't. Yes, it went well, and the fundraiser went well, didn't it? So we ended up with raised £920. We had some fantastic, I'm certainly not going to single out any particular individual donations, because anyone who donated what they could, be it £5 or £500. But we had some particularly generous donations towards the end that took us over the 900. And we have people like my good friends sort of James Stars and John Brown, both local landlords or publicans or business owners, whatever. I'm not sure what's the best way to describe them, but they both made financial donations and donated some wonderful prizes. So, but to everyone who donated, it was, you donated what you could. And around Christmas, I know asking people to part with money, when Christmas is around the corner, was potentially daft, a bit ballsy, I don't know, but everyone did really well, and we've been able to share that out amongst two wonderful charities and one sort of fantastic privately sort of funded recovery centre within Kent, which is great.
Excellent. Oh, that's really good news. Really positive. And it should be. There's no reason why it can't be a tradition, an annual kind of thing.
That's the aim. Yeah. Hopefully.
Good. Excellent. And how then does this Christmas and New Year compare with other Christmases and New Year? I think just the way that you've described the fact that your 4-year anniversary wasn't a non-event, but there was no bells and whistles around it.
Yeah.
But per se, am I to think that maybe Christmas is your new normal Christmas is kind of bedding in, that it's kind of no alcohol over Christmas? You're not necessarily feeling like you're missing out. Is that how?
Yeah, no, yeah. That's very fair. And I think the no bells and whistles, I have to be careful, and I have to understand and remind myself that as wonderful an achievement as every day of sobriety is, and every year that rolls around for me or other addicts, I have to be conscious of the pain and the darkness prior to it. And for myself, yes, but those closest to me. So it's all very good that Stu is 4 years sober, but it doesn't take away from what Stu did. And it was still me, suffering from an illness, an affliction, however we want to describe it, Mm-hmm. That's been discussed in previous pods, hasn't it? And potentially again in the future. But I don't want to. I'm not going to start. I can't go doing cartwheels around the living room because I have to remind myself what my good wife went through. What my parents went through. I wasn't a particularly good employee at work. I wasn't a good friend to many people in that time. So don't want to get down on myself, but I have to remember that it was as positive as 4 years is. There was some pretty horrific stuff prior to that, but yes, the new normal is Christmas with no beer. But I think my mental state or mental health was in a good place this year. It's been on the rise most weeks since the Open, where a lot of tiredness. That was always going to be a struggle. So it's on the up, and we discussed it in a previous episode, didn't we? Last year, Boris locked us down on the 24th or the 23rd or the 24th, didn't he?
Yeah.
And I think that hit everyone hard. It certainly hit me hard. And I did struggle not wanting a drink last week. Last year I struggled, or the year before, whatever it was. I struggled seeing other people enjoying alcohol. I was quite honest about that. I don't know why, because there'd been 2 or 3 previous Christmases where I had, obviously my first Christmas out of hospital. The last thing I wanted was a drink because my body was wrecked. But the Christmas after that, I don't know. I think there was a certain social thing. I probably missed that Christmas of, it would have been the Christmas of 2020, wouldn't it? When I'd spoke to my brother who was in Dubai at the time, my youngest one, and he was enjoying a big outdoor party. And my brother in Germany at the time was, when I spoke to him on the phone, he was in the pub with friends having a good time. Me and my wife were trying to control our daughter, whose probably mood wasn't great, and we were all a bit claustrophobic anyway. And I think potentially that was a social, perhaps I was missing the social aspect of the alcohol as well that time. I don't know.
Yeah. Okay, fair enough. I'm gonna rewind a little bit. I just want to labor on something that you've just said around, okay, so no cartwheels, no bells and whistles around celebrating the 4-year anniversary, because you have to remind yourself that there were some dark times, and you put some people through some terribly difficult periods and that sort of thing. And I get that. How long does that last, do you think? How long do you have to not be considered or measured in the way that you celebrate? Like, you get to 10 years. 10 years is an enormous achievement. I think there's only so much you can't change the past, and you've never shied away from acknowledging that, let's be frank, that I'll be frank, you could be somebody else, that your behavior was poor, and you put some people through, it was pretty shit. You've never shied away from that, and you've been authentic and genuine in sharing that. But I guess I'm from the outside, I don't think, given everything that you're doing around raising awareness and working on being a better version of yourself, you might feel that you can't acknowledge it in a more celebratory way because of what came before.
This might be the best question in 16 episodes. I can, and I don't know, because obviously the person closest to me in all of this has been my wife. I live with her, would you believe? I spend most of my time not at work is spent with my wife. So she experienced the worst of my addiction, as did I. And yes, we celebrated 4 years as a family, and forgiveness has been asked by me. I asked everyone for forgiveness in the hours, or certainly the days, while I was in hospital and when I left, and it was granted by everyone unconditionally. We all make mistakes, and I've never felt that any of no one in my close family or extended sort of friends really has ever gone back to the point, well, hey Stu, just remember you were a complete arsehole for 2-3 years. That's never been said. So perhaps I'm overthinking it, perhaps I'm over regulating myself, I don't know. But perhaps what I'm trying to say is that maybe I'm just try to be conscious that I celebrate it with those closest to me, and if I was able to, I'd certainly like to enjoy the experience with as many people as possible, and other people, who've suffered with addiction, suffering with, and in good or not so good recovery. We could, all enjoy the positives, but yeah, there's something that certainly holds me back a little bit. I obviously I was promoting Stay Sober with Stu through December, and even doing that, you just, although it is a great cause and we're raising great money for great causes, you still don't want to bomb everyone on social media with it. I don't think. So, yeah, great question.
No, I get that. I think, and I think your perspective on it will be much more in tune, or perhaps you used the word overthinking, which might be a possibility there. But an assumption that might be made, and I don't want to talk on Mrs. Butler's behalf because I can't. I've only met her once. Is that date of you stopping drinking also represents a chapter for her where things improved significantly as well.
Yeah, she lost a drinking partner but gained a husband.
Yeah, exactly. So, you win some, you lose some, but there's plenty of other people that she can go drinking with.
Oh, she's got plenty of them, yeah.
Yeah. So, okay, interesting. We started that new year off with a bit of a bang. So, okay, so while we're in the topic of the new year, tell us then about kind of aspirations for the Henry Weston's Old Mate podcast, the blogs. We've had discussions offline, but do you want to share it with listeners and viewers?
Yeah, well, let's start with the blog, because the blog, this podcast wouldn't be here without the blog. I think it's fair to say that. And the blog didn't, I don't want to use the word suffered, but as the podcasts have, me and you have sat down once a week for the best part of 3-4 months, and I've been producing other content. Sorry, Phil, but I have.
Feels like you're cheating on me. It's a disgrace.
But the blog certainly tailed off a little bit, and I still managed to write once a week while I was, attending my daughter's ballet classes on a Tuesday. But I want the blog is now going to become a little bit of self-improvement. So obviously, for anyone who read my first blog, I've outlined what I want to do with it, and what I basically want to do is I'm going to try and make small improvements over the course of 12 months. So it's going to be a block of 12 months with each month having an overall aim. I hope it will. What I want to do this January is eating better. It's something that I do most Januaries and never continue it, but I'm going to try and I want to try and find some better. I want to improve my relationship with food. I want to improve my relationship with bad food. I can't use the excuse that I don't drink anymore. Like I'll just have some ice cream because everyone else is having a pint of lager, which I do every time I go out for a meal. I will have dessert because I haven't had a lager. What a load of old shite that is. And we said it off air. I'll have been running solidly for 2 years come early March, and I have done nothing but break even. And that's okay. But when I sit back and look at all the positives I sit here and try and promote with regards to alcoholism recovery, addiction recovery, and mental health, and I write about how I've tried to improve my mental health, and I am honest. I write about both the downs that come in between the ups. But then I go and run 10 miles and put 2 massive pizzas in the oven, 45 chicken wings with full fat coleslaw, dip the chips in barbecue sauce, and sort of sit back on the sofa and just think, wow, that's all right, because I ran 10 miles this morning, and it's just such poor form. And it's contradictory to what, it's not like me. I'll make a silly point here, but what if I, on the 1st of every month, I decided, I'm just gonna go drinking at the 1st of every month because I've had 29 days off it every month. Yeah. It's just stupid. Someone would say, well, you're an alcoholic, Stuart. That's stupid. Why would you do that? That's not doing you any good. So I've gone off point, but that is what January is going to be. And there will be 4 small blocks within January that I'm going to put up some very small points. They're not going to be dramatic. It will be things like hopefully next week, I'm going to try and reduce my social media usage in the evenings. It's bloody shocking. I'm currently having an argument on Twitter that I didn't really ask for. I made a comment suggesting that some words published by Bigger were positive because they'd highlighted some, and some guys onto me saying it's not positive. So I'll get to him later, Mr. Copeland. I'll come and find you. Um,
Right. Okay.
But perhaps that's. But I don't. This is. I haven't. I haven't. I try to avoid these things on social media now, but I still sit there refreshing Twitter for too long in the evenings. Not in the search of an argument. I think because potentially I'm bored. So there's going to be things like that. I want to improve my French, not drastically, but if I say this on, I must have said this on a tweet, on a blog last year. If I do 1 hour, if I do 2 hours of French every week, I'll have put 100 hours in by this time next year. And that has to be good. And I didn't do it. So let's see if we can do that a bit. And so that's the blog. And the podcast, we'll put the link to the blog in here. The podcast, I think we've said, haven't we, that my story is coming to an end. I don't really know. I think potentially signing off with that wonderful episode with Becca might, we got to the point of coming out and sharing stories on social media. So I think my story is put to bed. It will be revisited in discussions, but there is so much to discuss within alcoholism and addiction, Phil. And I think you bring a very honest sort of approach to the subjects we discuss, and you bring the good research, which I sometimes don't.
Yeah. Okay.
But I can't. So I will certainly have to improve that this year because I won't have the luxury of relying on my lived experience, and I can come across as honest and genuine talking about my lived experience because it is honest and genuine. Well, it's honest, and I try to be genuine within that. Mm-hmm. But if we are going to broach subjects like we just discussed off air, I've written a note, addiction as opposed to dependence. Is there something to be discussed there? And I've written 2 notes: alcohol and drugs. If you stop drinking or taking drugs, if you are physically dependent, if your body is dependent on those substances and you stop, you could, in the worst case scenario, die. Your body will go into shock, and you could potentially die. You'll suffer from seizures, I believe, Phil, will you?
Well, yeah, quite possibly. I guess it depends on the nature of your addiction and kind of how far along you are within that. But, things like seizures are not uncommon. People get, the toxin build-up with alcoholics, when their liver starts to pack in, you get a something called encephalopathy, which is essentially your brain not being washed of toxins, and you start to be, you can't walk properly with or without a drink, those sorts of things. Yeah. Your brain just isn't working really as it should. So a sudden somebody who has encephalopathy, who then suddenly stops drinking, is quite likely to suffer seizures. Yeah.
Yes, I'm going to be okay saying prevalent now that you've stumbled on that one. So to counter to my sort of counter argument or discussion point to that is if alcohol and drugs versus sex and gambling, which could be some dodgy title for some dodgy old record, but I've just got written here, if you can stop having sex, or if you're addicted to sex or gambling, you can stop and you won't die. But please don't get on to me, the gambling and the sex addicts. I know it's not as simple as that, but I'm just brainstorming. Is there potentially a very interesting discussion to be had within that area of addiction?
Yeah, I think there is so much as well within that. I think it's an interesting topic when you start digging into into addiction from that point of view. But I also think that there is, particularly with sex addiction and gambling, by and large, I think that there, particularly with one of those two, there is a significant gender bias.
Yeah.
We only think about men having a sex addiction. And well, I do, and I think that is probably sorry, let me just rephrase that, because I've just heard that back. I don't only think about men having a sex addiction. That's not what I meant.
This
What I
won't
mean
be
is,
clipped to your disadvantage, I'm sure.
right, yeah, thanks, Lee. But by and large, the stories that come out really in the media will be men who have a sex addiction, and there must be, but there's a gender bias there, and I think that the gender bias still exists when we come into gambling as well,
Yeah.
where I think it's less so prevalent. I can say that word, with drinking and drugs.
Yes.
So
Yeah. I
so
just
yeah,
yeah.
so I think it's lots of layers we can certainly go into that, which I think is which is going to be interesting. I think the other thing that we're talking about via WhatsApp and all the rest of it was the different dimensions that, having some guests on to bring their, not just their lived experience but their professional experience as well,
Yeah.
is going to add some real value to what we're trying to, I don't know, share in terms of a message. And it's not just kind of other people with other lived experiences, but you spoke really eloquently and opened my eyes when we talked about Alcoholics Anonymous and how that felt going in there, and the sort of venue. And it's not the thing that I've got in my head. It's something very welcoming. But likewise, my point of reference for a recovery unit, so somewhere that you might pay to go, as an establishment that you go and be residential.
Yeah.
My reference point again is TV and film,
Yeah.
and I've got something in my mind about that isn't necessarily appealing or glamorous. It certainly not somewhere that I'd want to book a 2-week holiday to, for sure.
Yeah.
But let's get, we've talked about contacting a few places to come and talk to us about that experience and what that looks like. So
Yes. Yeah. And I've got there's a couple of options. I'd like to get Jamie on, my friend who I podcasted with, a recovering cocaine addict who's had battles with alcoholism as well, in recovery for both, and he would be, that's an angle that we can approach again. Hopefully we are better podcasters now than when I sat down with Jamie. We covered some very good points, but there's still so much that we could discuss. And so I looked over the notes I'd made for the podcast with Jamie, and there was so much that we didn't cover then because of the time restraint, as we always say. Where did that hour go with Jamie? So he's someone who I'd like to get back on, and I've sent a few Instagram messages and Twitter messages. I've had a grand response of 0 so far, but that's the game. As Becca said, you just got to keep knocking on that door.
yeah, absolutely.
So we'll keep doing that. But there are. I've joined a couple. I've started reading the book that I promised you I will finish. My marketing the podcast. I have joined a couple of addiction recovery groups on Facebook. I'm not lurking in the background as such, but I'm just seeing how everyone interacts within these groups, before I potentially sort of start interacting with a few people, and hopefully that could lead to some build up of relationships and potentially guests on the podcast.
Yeah.
I haven't gone in there on day one and put a post that I'm a small podcaster looking for recovering alcoholics to come on my podcast. Oh, by the way, hi, I'm Stuart.
Yeah.
But there's that option, and and there's I think And you'd probably be of the same opinion, Phil. I think mental health is something that we've touched on a lot, isn't it? Within my story and just with our general discussions. We probably both had our ups and downs with it over the years, and potentially in the last few days or hours. That's stuck with us for life, I think, sadly. But I think it's something that can be looked into across all ages and sexes, and how people, because I haven't had too many people feedback to me in recent episodes, but I remember a couple of people picked up on the fact that when we discussed mental health and anxiety, and I can't remember if it was me or you used the phrase of that, when you're having a bad day, it's almost like someone is pushing down on you and you can't get up to do what you want to do. And people said, well, you know, it is, I have those feelings, but how can I explain to my wife, my partner, my boss, you know, when I go home from, I have a good day at work on Monday and I phone him up on Tuesday and say, I can't come in. Well, have you got the flu? No, I just can't come in. When really you want to tell him is, I can't get out of bed, not physically, mentally. So I think that
I think the mental health thing is something that you know, we've like you say, we've touched on frequently, but haven't necessarily given it the depth. And there is so much to it, both from, like you say, lived experience, but also kind of what we see out and about there. And I think even what you were just saying earlier on about, you know, mental health and exercise, mental health and food, it, you know, without it being scripted. But today for me, I'm going cold turkey. I'm now 5 days into no social media at all. I've taken it off my phone. I've deleted it, the shortcuts off my computer. When I say social media, I mean Facebook and Twitter. I quite like the Instagram reels. They're quite funny. And I don't follow many people on Instagram, so it's not really a thing. But Facebook and Twitter have become a cesspit for me, and I seem to, like you, spend most of my evenings just refreshing, not necessarily interacting, sometimes retweeting, but often looking either for the latest scoop, the news thing, or the just the latest thing to be angry about.
Right.
And I'm just like, why am I doing it to myself? So we have, I've done that, but then we're instigating things to make sure that I'm not bored and distracted in the evenings. And the prime one, which is always the best one, it works every time, is we watch movies and TV shows in a foreign language with subtitles.
Oh, okay.
So if you're not watching the subtitles and reading the subtitles and you're on Twitter, you've lost the plot of the story on the screen. So and
there's potential for some foreign tongue to sneak in between the ears as well.
I don't know where to say that. My wife is Welsh. We could say that's foreign. But yeah, no, absolutely, so yeah, the mental health side of things and the things to help, the small things to help get you past kind of those bad habits that are in place. So whether it's a pizza and 45 chicken wings, as you said, or whether it's social media or whatever, I think there's some, how we build habits, positive habits. I think there's plenty to talk about in that sense. And, you know, if you want to set an audacious goal, then the pre-Christmas Henry Weston's old mate will be Henri Weston's old mate in French completely, and we'll go for it.
Yes. No, it's great to hear, and I think certainly that that attitude towards social media. I mean, I had got much better during lockdown. I got into some wholly unnecessary arguments, many of which I went looking for, and a couple that I didn't. But this must be the first time in a year that I don't mind people disagreeing with me on social media. I wouldn't use it otherwise, but I think this guy on here is spoiling for an argument, so I'm probably just going to ignore it, which I wouldn't have a long time ago, and now, yeah. But I certainly could do with. It's not a problem during the day because I'm generally busy. I do look at my phone when operating a tractor. I'm operating it quite slowly, but I have to be. There's lots of things in the ground with what I'm putting holes in the ground. There's lots of things I could potentially break in the ground if I'm messing around on my phone. But when I get home, it's bad, and I don't want to get into the habit of. For the first time in a long time, I actually restricted our daughter to 30 minutes on the tablet from when she got home to going to bed. And we stuck to it. She wasn't chuffed, but my laziness in coming in, because by allowing her to sit in front of the tablet for an hour, it allows me to sit in front of the tablet for an hour, and it's doing neither of us any good.
Yeah, absolutely. It seems like mirror activities going on, because the kids here have got we'll see how we go in 2 weeks' time, whether the arguments are still going on about kind of technology for children. But the arguments when you say it's time to turn that off are worse than saying you're not allowed it at all. I've got one teenager and one that's coming up to 11, and when you ask them to turn it off, the eldest one particularly, it's quite hostile. So
well,
go on.
No, I set the timer and it beeped, and she didn't want to, but she did turn it off after I'd asked the second time. And within 5 minutes, she was fine. She was sat in a little table, doing her arts and crafts in the other living room. And I just looked at her, and she was happy and content. And I just thought she didn't need that half an hour on the tablet. We could have come in and done, and she would get used to that. I don't want to take it away from her all the time, because she's had a whole day at school. She's only little, and we should all have some fun in our lives. But I did think, I'm 42 and don't seem to be able to control how I am around my electrical devices. Sometimes I wouldn't say I'm addicted to it, but it's what I do in my evenings. It's not good for me. And me and you have discussed in the past about potentially my sleep or my bad sleep patterns. If I've been looking at an iPad for 2 or 3 hours, and some nights it is 3 hours, 6:30 till 9:30, and the telly will be on, and I'll be gazing at the iPad as well. And that's not good for the brain. If I then turn it off and go, I'll just go to sleep now, it doesn't work.
No, it doesn't. And there's a whole load of science behind why that doesn't work as well. So that'll be interesting. So we'll use the podcast actually as a means to hold ourselves to account.
Definitely.
To make sure that we're not slipping into habits that we don't see as being healthy, or that we want to at least moderate a bit more.
Yeah, and I think it will allow us, not cheating, but by having a slightly broader profile of topics, will potentially broaden the guests that we can get on, but hopefully the small audience that we're building up, we want to, you may understand that I've been reading the first few chapters of a book, but we have an audience tuning in to listen to addiction recovery, and potentially we don't want them to switch off, but hopefully discussions on this pod will continue to be around improvements within. My story so far is a story of 4 years of a pretty gradual positive improvements. And now that my addiction, my need to drink isn't there, I still have to manage it, but I am able to broaden out and try and improve other areas of my life. So hopefully the listeners who have come on board for these, as we said, 15 episodes of my story of addiction and recovery, hopefully they will stick with us, and hopefully some of them might even be interested on coming on and, you know, interacting with us and sort of sharing some of their, not necessarily bad points, but how they're looking to improve their lives. So
Yeah,
let's see.
Yeah, like you say, it's there's a definite slant towards a kind of a broader well-being topic
Yeah,
rather than a
good
focus.
word.
Thanks, mate.
Yeah, prevalent.
Keep practicing. Encephalopathy. Yeah. Yeah. No. Okay. Good. So hopefully, we're gonna try and build out an agenda and a structure around. Agenda is not the right word,
Yeah.
but definitely a structure around where we're going to go with this over the next 12 months, and reach out, try and get some guests on, and the guests can be, high profile or no profile.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. So like Becca said in the last one, which really stuck with me, actually, I think it was at one, she shot me down, but she didn't mean to shoot me down. It kind of put me in my place, which I actually really appreciated, was that I was kind of a little bit, not starstruck, but really impressed that she'd managed to get people with high profile to come onto her thing. And she's like, they're just people and they've got a story. It's like,
Yes.
that's
But did
exactly
you
right.
have you seen the clip of Jeff Stelling over the weekend giving his views on the Queen's Honours list, suggesting that it shouldn't be people like Jeff Stelling? A few of the guys in the, studio were suggesting he maybe deserved a bump up from wherever he currently sits in the Queen's table, and
Yeah.
he was adamant that that honours list should go to the people who are not famous but are going out of their way to help others, or are stories of success that could inspire, other people. And I'm not going to say my story should inspire people, but hopefully it can show people that it can be done. And anyone who would have known me 5 years ago, 6 years ago, and started listening to this would have gone, it can't have been, Stu can't have been an alcoholic. We know he liked to drink, but he can't, he was a happy-go-lucky guy, always up for anything, but always knew when to stop. But I didn't. And
Yeah.
probably the people might even be more surprised to have learned that I really have struggled and continue to do at times struggle with my mental health.
Mm-hmm.
So let's try and find some more stories, and hopefully find the people who want to come on. My mate Vinny, who I podcasted with about his approach to a sober life, not as an addict. I didn't think he had any drinks problem or a problem with drink, and then he came on, and we hadn't really talked too much off air, and he said, "No, I'm not an alcoholic. I don't suffer from addiction, but I had a really, really unhealthy relationship with alcohol." And that
Yeah.
surprised me, because I thought Vinny was probably just going to come on and explain to me that he'd had enough. They wanted to have a child, so he stopped drinking and he just carried it on. But to learn that, he really had a bad relationship with alcohol, more to the point where it was the hangovers that were really the problem, and the fact that how much of his life he was missing out on due to hangovers towards the end. So,
Yeah.
get some more, and I'm going to chat with Vinny again, and I'd like Vinny to come on and chat with sort of the pair of us as well, because he spoke fantastically well, and it was nice to be caught off guard as well by that. Perhaps we kind of went for we cobbled it together sort of a bit last minute, and I said we'll just come on and have a chat. Maybe a little bit more research would have been good, but my reaction to recording it, I was a bit like, oh wow, wasn't expecting that. So there was that almost organic,
Yeah.
can't fake it kind of reaction, which went really well, and we had some really good, and Vinny in particular had some really good feedback to that. So yeah, some more of that, please.
Okay. Well, we'll do that. Looking forward to it, actually, for 2022. So now that you've got into chapter 3 of your How to Be a Successful Podcaster,
Yeah.
I went on a mission looking for how to rate the podcast so that it becomes a little bit more visible. Now
Yeah.
that it took me ages to work that out because I was looking on the wrong devices, but just in the interest of time, we are gonna wrap up, but we want our listeners to be a bit more active in promoting the podcast. So talk us through what the ask is.
The ask is, so within the podcast, if you are listening to this and not watching us on YouTube, we are just going to ask you to rate and hopefully review the podcast. So if you are on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, above Henry Weston's Old Mate, the title, or if you click on the show, then you will see 3 little dots within one big circle. And by clicking on that, it will allow you to rate 1 to 5. 5 is good. Give us 5 if you like the podcast. And if you could write a review, that would be great. It doesn't have to be long. It could be amusing. But it's all about the algorithms, isn't it, Phil? And I said that word well as well. I'm on fire tonight.
Yeah.
If we've only got 40 or 50 people listening to the podcast, that is fine. And if that's the audience that are engaging and listening to us, that is great. So let's say 80% of you like the show, that clicks the algorithm. That alerts Spotify that we are doing something well, and Spotify will then try and promote our podcast to hopefully, there's only so much me and Phil, there's only so much I can do now. Phil's kicked social media to one side. There's only so much little old Stu, the full-time greenkeeper and dad and part-time podcaster, can do. But the algorithms within Spotify, Apple Pods will do that. So you can rate and review the audio. Within YouTube, you can like individual episodes. So if you are watching our beautiful faces with our beautiful ring lights and new microphones and you like it, you can like that episode and you can like the channel and you can obviously comment. So comments will work well within the algorithm for the YouTube. So if you can like each episode you watch, I don't expect you to remember every time, but this isn't about personal gain for me and Phil. You know, there's no money involved here. We're never going to get rich doing this. We're never going to make a penny. But if we can get the content out, you are watching this because you enjoy it and you tune back in next week because you enjoy it. And hopefully you get some benefits. So if we can get that out to more people, then that has to be a positive thing. So it's the like, rate, review. I'm going to try and say it all the time. Within this video, I'll clip in some pictures of just how to do it, because I know my mother will be watching or listening to this going, I'm never going to be able to do it. You will, Mum. You will. I promise. I'm going to show you how. There you go.
Excellent. Okay, so like, rate, review. You've just mentioned your mum. Her blog just before Christmas was a pretty emotional read. I've got to say, it made my bottom lip wobble a little bit. Kind of well done to her for articulating it, and also kind of grateful for her sharing it. It was a good read, but kind of, I don't mean to use the pun, but it was sobering as well.
Yes. Well, we have said, potential area of discussion is how do you know if someone's addicted? Potentially an episode entitled that. I don't know. My mother did come on and do a podcast with me and my brothers, more of a fun one. I don't think my wife would be up for. In fact, she wouldn't be up for coming on the podcast. But potentially, my mum might be able to offer some insights. You know, sadly, she has a lived experience from me. So potentially, I'm not going to stitch you up and say definitely, but if anyone else is watching this and would like to come on, just drop us a message. Henry Weston's Old Mate the Pod at gmail.com has still not received many emails.
I'm just going to bombard you from my own email address just so you've got something to read.
I checked on it because that was the email address I actually put on the blog that I wrote for Brian on his turf care blog, and it had 500 reads of it yesterday when it went out. So I thought potentially someone's dropped old Henry Weston's, but no,
not a single
never mind.
Okay. Right. Okay. So this was the New Year's ramble.
Yes.
A good kind of overview of what we've got coming up for 2021. I'm glad we're still going to do it. I was a little bit worried that we'd got to the end of your story and we were going to stop, which would have put an end to our weekly catch-ups, which I very much enjoyed as well.
Yeah, I'm so glad that we're going on. I really genuinely am. Yeah, for these interactions in a selfish way, but there is stuff to talk about. Yeah.
Great. So until next week, stay strict and disciplined on your goals for the week. Food.
Yeah, I've got a chocolate headache. I've got a sugar headache. But never mind. I should be eating Haribo now. I'd be eating a Haribo now. For the last year, I've been eating Haribo now.
Okay, so cutting those down then. Yeah, and we will catch up next week with a shiny new episode with our wonderful new audio equipment.
Yes, what a pleasure it's been, Phil.
What a pleasure. All right, cheers, Stu. Take care.
Thanks, mate.